New Year's resolutions are something I don't make very often, but after putting it off for ages, I finally decided to commit and beat Dark Souls, and boy I'm glad I did. After I finished it though, it left a bigger hole in my life than I expected. It was like finishing an excellent TV series. Not only did it leave a void, but it makes you hypercritical of everything else because you become so accustomed to a higher standard of content. I just wanted every game to be like Dark Souls, or at least have elements of it going forward. It made me go back through my games library and ask myself if any of these games really are something from me as a player. A lot of games have become complacent in only asking players to follow arrows and checkpoint markers to complete hollow tasks. And to an extent, I think that's shaped a lot of gamers' expectations of what a game should provide. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with games like this, but whether it's through original gameplay, decision making or puzzle solving, I would argue that games become much more interesting to play and think about when it demands something more from us as a player beyond following breadcrumbs on a minimap. I wanted to take a brief look into how some games nudge us out of our comfort zone and defy our expectations to create a more fulfilling and involving experience. In the case of Dark Souls, challenge and difficulty is very much a part of its USP. Everything about the first few minutes of that game are about toying with your expectations, and if you're coming from almost any other video game, Dark Souls feels like it's really pushing you way out of your comfort zone. Perhaps most infamously, it pits you against the first boss while you have nothing but a broken sword to fight with. It's a real baptism of fire, but after you get deeper into the experience, you'll begin to notice Dark Souls is the epitome of a carrot and stick game. For every infuriating death, and there will be several, there are also glorious victories to be had. I love how everything feels chunky. Moving and attacking has a proper heft to it, and your dodge roll is hilariously crap when wearing heavy armour. At times it feels like you're playing a survival horror game rather than an action RPG. It all makes your character feel not only tangible, but vulnerable. Additionally, the pace of the combat commands your attention at all times, whereas other action-adventure games pit you against snappy enemy encounters. Every enemy in Dark Souls should be treated as a matter of life and death. Learning how to effectively deal with each new enemy type is like unravelling a mini puzzle, and mastery of the game's combat only comes with dedication and experience. You really need to invest some time and patience into this game, and the only way to move forward is to push through tougher and tougher levels. You'll find motivation in your failure, and every death is a lesson learned. It's like rehearsing for a play. Every time you respawn at the bonfire, you know your next run is going to be even more refined than the last. After you learn about everything the game can throw at you, quickly fall into a very steady cycle of defeat and victory, and few other games offer the same sense of accomplishment when you finally defeat a boss that previously overwhelmed you. That's not to say that every game should strive to push players to the limit with tough as nails combat and gameplay, because you can accomplish similar things by pushing a player mentally. Telltale's The Walking Dead throws you right into the deep end of dealing with the human drama that comes with the zombie apocalypse, and it loves to put you in some unbearably uncomfortable positions. While leading your ragtag band of survivors to safety, the game forces you to frequently make some very hard decisions that may or may not result in the death of one of your companions. The life and death choices can be tricky, but you'll likely be equally stumped by some of the more political choices you have to make. Every choice has a legitimate weight to it, and they will affect how the story moves forward, and the game will constantly remind you of who you're being judged by. And in a lawless world infested with zombies, it's generally a good idea not to piss too many people off. One of the best moments in the game tasks you with rationing out your very limited supply of food to the entire group after having a very heated argument with all of your companions. Do you give them the food as a peace offering? Or do you share it with the people more likely to stick with you in the future? Do you even have enough for the children?
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
These are all questions floating around in your mind at this point, and it's an awful yet genius responsibility to give to the player.
Not such an easy job, is it?
What sets Walking Dead apart from games like Fallout or Mass Effect is its lack of a morality or a karma system. Your actions are not simply marked as good and evil, and that uncertainty makes your choices significantly harder to make. You're not doing something as binary as helping grandma across the street or shooting her in the face anymore. The Walking Dead not only ends up crafting a unique game experience for each player, but it also tests your decision-making skills in extreme situations. Expect to learn a little bit more about yourself or your friends after you play these games. The XCOM games also love to put you in hairy situations like this where there are no easy answers. Even the most cautious of players will often find themselves having to make a Hobson's choice. I can't even tell you the amount of times I almost sacrificed a teammate for the good of a mission. And even if you achieve victory, you'll sometimes have to ask yourself, but at what cost? Since your soldiers die permanently in that game, there are some very real consequences to your tactical decisions. Possibly one of the hardest challenges for any player is selecting your difficulty level for a brand new game. Finding that perfect level of challenge can really help immerse you deeper into the experience, The first time I played The Witcher 3, I felt challenged by having to make decisions during key story moments, just like in The Walking Dead. So far so good. But outside of maybe 1 or 2 boss fights, I found the gameplay generally to be an absolute cakewalk. A few months later I went back and ramped up the difficulty level to Death March, and I noticed an immediate difference. Now I had to watch and learn enemy movement patterns, use blade oils, potions and Witcher armour, all things I neglected to use properly the first time round, but are absolutely essential if you want to survive on the higher difficulties. But in order to get all these things, you need to go exploring, and I saw so much more of the world doing some of these quests, and it was remarkable to discover all these extra pockets of content I missed. Because the combat became so much more demanding, I was forced to interact with systems and parts of the world that I otherwise ignored. Altogether, it brought me much deeper into the role-playing experience, and it really felt like a Witcher. And after completing that campaign, I certainly felt accomplished. Speaking of which, here's a fun game you can play: Steam Global Achievement Percentages! If you go through some of your favourite Steam games and look back at some of your proudest achievements, you may be surprised to see just how few people have also earned what you have. The fact I'm even bringing this up speaks volumes about how proud I was of myself when I finally beat Witcher on the hardest difficulty. It was the cherry on top of one of the best gaming experiences I've had in a very long while, and earning an achievement for it is totally a bragging point. But that's cool, because it can lead to conversations or dialogues about shared experiences with others. I went back to friends to ask about how tough they found certain bosses were in Dark Souls, or asked them about what choices they made in The Walking Dead, and that always resulted in some hilarious or insightful conversations about how they overcame those challenges. These games leave an impression on us because they force us to think differently and engage our minds in unexpected ways. They present a type of challenge that isn't typical for most games. But if you're willing to leap in and invest some time and heart into these games, then you're going to get so much more out of them. I celebrate games like this because they push the boat out a little bit, they surprise you with their objectives, and they take pride in playing with your expectations of what a game can be. Because when you think about video games, you think of this. And not this. There's so many other games out there that do this too, but these are by far some of the most accessible examples. And hey, I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls recently, so I needed an excuse to talk about it. It's simultaneously frightening and exciting to be pushed out of your comfort zone. It's the same as trying new foods or travelling to a different country. God damn, it'll be weird at first, but that's the only way you'll get to experience new things. In the case of video games, you'll value your game time that much more if you put a bit of work in it to overcome its challenges. And some of the best games out there challenge our own perceptions of what we are capable of. And knowing that you completed a game as a better, more skilled player is a really amazing feeling.